as well, Katie. So with that said, actually, Bruce, let me start off by asking you a question. Why did the Access Board decide to point to external standards of the W3C as opposed to creating your own?
And hi, I'm Bruce. I'm with the Access Board. And we're the organization that does the facility requirements under the Americans with Disabilities Act and also the Architectural Barrier Act, and then had the it takes a village to write these standards, but I was one of the the lead editors with the line by line work, and that was very much a thing. An important development for us was figuring out that we wanted to be referencing standards as opposed to as much as possible, which there's actually an OMB, Office of Management and Budget Directive, to do that. So it's it's very much a requirement really to when a federal agency develops standards to use industry consensus standards as much as possible if you can, and we've done that here with revised standards. So that's one of the big things I point to people is that you can't just look at what we publish in the Federal Register, what's in the Code of Federal Regulation, the CFR. You have to go to these other external standards in some places, but then most especially you have to go to the W3C Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, those success criteria for the level A and the level AA success criteria, and those are part of the requirements. People, there's always a little bit of pushback about that because it's Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, and we're applying those web content requirements to non-web documents and software, and they work well enough for doing that, and we've had a lot of feedback that yes, that was a reasonable approach to take. It took a couple years just to answer that one question. We really upset industry when we did that because they were like, okay, you people are nuts. It's web content guidelines and you're applying it to non-web software and non-web documents. The federal government is clearly out of its mind. But, but it was very interesting because we had that caused industry to get together and form another advisory committee really that worked through the success criteria line by line to say, well, is this really a realistic, reasonable thing to do? And they validated that whole process. And it was great too, because usually when the federal government convenes an advisory committee, it takes a lot of money and resources, and we so upset industry that they did it all on their own dime, right? So that was good, but it really did validate the process. I'll talk a little bit more about the Web Contents Accessibility Guidelines a bit more, but the other word there is guidelines. Well, okay, they're guidelines. They're not requirements. We don't really have to do it. No. When the federal government says we're now incorporating these by reference, they now become requirements. It doesn't matter that they have guidelines in the title of the standard. It's a standard. It's measurable. It's you can tell if you did it. And I want to circle back to our incident this morning. It's important to have these minimum standards, and if they don't get, and so my agency does the facility standards. So it's like the ramp didn't meet those specifications. So you're gonna definitely have problems when you don't meet the specifications. I mean, it's they're like the ramp.
Related to reality.
Yes, exactly. They've had lots of experiential and objective scientific evidence that it's important, and people's actual user experiences. So yeah, the minimum going to that. You said lowest common denominator, which of course none of us like, but then we all work in IT, and we're all about nowadays the minimal viable product. Minimal viable product. It sounds a lot to me like lowest common denominator. I'm sorry, but that's okay. But accessibility is part of that minimal viable product. And I had one other note there, but I'll go ahead and stop that.
No, but